up, guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Kody and Nick podcast. I am Nick McDonald.
And I'm Kody Barwick.
This is part two of the NFC South. We're getting into the last two teams on our list, the Panthers and the Falcons. Obviously two teams that are expected to be in the bottom half of the NFL, but some interesting fantasy points to talk about nonetheless here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Panthers, I could talk about the Panthers all day just because I, for some reason, am infatuated with Sam Darnold and think that every year's his year to break out. So I think I'm going to stay away this year. But for some reason in the past, I've always liked Sam Darnold for no reason whatsoever. But before we hop into there, if you are watching, please like, comment, subscribe, any kind of interaction. We greatly appreciate it. We're doing most advertising or posting through Facebook. So if you have fantasy questions or anything like that, feel free to comment on the YouTube. We would really appreciate it. We love the engagement. So, with that, let's jump right into the Panthers and my man, Sam Darnold. Cause this is the year, like Cowboys fans say, but I think that, this year could, it has to be good. Otherwise, they're going to have a new quarterback, new coach, new everything next year. Their owner's not looking to lose. Obviously, I would say he was the hottest and heaviest for Deshaun Watson before Cleveland got involved. And you can see how that situation's playing itself out. So he wants to win. If they can't win, it's going to be a whole change. I like the changes or some of the offseason moves. I like drafting, Charles Cross at tackle, give Sam Darnold some protection, but I think this team kind of, it comes and goes with Christian McCaffrey. In part one of the NFC South, we talked about Alvin Kamara and how he's the motor of the Saints. Christian McCaffrey is like that times two for the Panthers. Cause I would say, Jameis is better than Sam Darnold, which isn't saying a lot, but it's true. So, if Christian McCaffrey could stay healthy, I could see where this team can be a fringe playoff team. But without him tearing it up, this team's going to be well below 500 and going to look like a whole new organization next year.
Yeah, like you said, it's going to come down to Darnold and how he plays. If he can just game manage and let McCaffrey do his thing out of the backfield, I think they can play some good defense and maybe get to 9 or 10 wins. And like you said, maybe sneak in one of those wild cards since there's 7 teams that get in now. But I don't see a ton of ceiling here. I don't really see how the offense gets into a top 10 type of unit. And the defense is a solid unit as well. But again, I don't really see how it gets into the top 5 either. And you kind of need an elite side here one way or another to make it to 11 or 12 wins. So I think the Panthers are kind of counting on Darnold to take a step here and McCaffrey to stay healthy. And those are two things that just have not happened over the past couple of years. So,
yep, I completely agree. And we don't got to go any more deeper than that. Let's just hop right over into fantasy with good old Christian McCaffrey. We're going on 2 straight fantasy seasons where 2 years ago he was completely irrelevant due to injury. Last year he did have a few amazing weeks, but was injured for the majority of the season. McCaffrey and non-PPR is probably going to be going off number 2, being the second running back. And in a full PPR, I can understand, Cooper Kupp going before him, but besides Kupp, there's no other player I would take. Obviously JT, I think he's just we both agree he's the consensus 101 on both our boards. So, he's going to be number 2 taken off. It just all comes down to health. And you may get lucky and the player who's drafting in one of those spots may have got burned by him 2 years in a row. Right. And they don't want to do it again. And you might be able to get him, in that 3 or 4 spot. But, if JT and Cooper Kupp are both off the board, I think he's got to be the next one to go unless you have a personal vendetta against him.
Right. And there will be people that have that for sure, like you said.
For sure.
There's not really too much to say about McCaffrey. When he plays, he's amazing, and he's the best player in fantasy. It's really not that close. The numbers bear it out. But he has not been on the field very much the past 2 years, and the injuries have been many and all across the board. It's not like he's just had a couple unlucky, like ligament tears. Those kind of things are a little less predictive of future injury, but lots of soft tissue, lots of hamstring, lots of ankle. It's been tough. And if he can stay on the field, he'll be the RB1, and it won't really be that close, but that's the only question here. Kody, I might have lost your audio here.
No, we didn't. Sorry. I didn't mute myself for just a second.
You're good.
I was just saying with McCaffrey, I agree with pretty much everything. And same thing we kind of said about Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara. You just kind of got to grab his backup.
Yeah.
Kamara's a little bit of a different situation, but if McCaffrey goes down, your issue is hopefully you grab the right backup.
Exactly.
But I think you have to invest in who you think is going to be the backup, just because if he goes down, and I mean, I had him 2 years ago. I luckily had no shares of him last year, but if you talk to someone who had Christian McCaffrey, last year in fantasy, it was not fun, especially if you did not get Hubbard. And I got Hubbard in a couple leagues, and he's nowhere near Christian McCaffrey level. So
he wasn't great.
Yeah, and if you draft him and he goes down, his backup most likely isn't going to be able to produce the way he wants, and it's kind of a rough fantasy season. So he may even be a player that if he goes crazy in the first 3 weeks, I mean, it may be risky, but maybe try and trade him, just sell him on his absolute high value. It would be really, really, really hard to do. I'm not saying I could do it, but if he has 3 amazing weeks to start, you'd have to consider it because you'd be able to get a haul.
I think in Dynasty, I would consider that. But in redraft, I think his position, I mean, his value is just too high. If he comes out and he looks good and he's healthy, I think I would just keep him because he's going to win the championship if he stays healthy. I think especially in redraft, like smaller 10-team leagues, you're really just looking for that positional advantage, and he can provide that for even if you get a ransom. I think McCaffrey is just going to win out if he's on the field. So I think in Dynasty, I would take that route and go ahead and just trade him for peak value if he comes out and looks great. But redraft, I'm probably hanging on to him if he looks good because he's going to win you a championship if he stays healthy the whole year.
I can understand that absolutely. So let's move into this next guy.
Yeah, we can move into DJ Moore. Do you want to start out with him?
Yeah, I'll start out with DJ Moore. I'm definitely more on the upside of DJ Moore than you are. I still like DJ Moore. I mean, it's a little bit risky with Sam Darnold being his quarterback, but I think he can be very successful in an offense that's moving, and their offense has just been so stagnant with McCaffrey off the field. So if McCaffrey stays healthy, I could see DJ Moore finally having that breakout potential year, because he is a physical freak. I mean, if you flip flop him and Mike Evans, I mean, he would be near the top of draft boards. He's so good. So it's a situation where unfortunately it's a dependent quarterback, but you can still get him at good value. He's kind of following where DK Metcalf, Marquis Brown are. Out of those 3, I would probably take DJ Moore. How do you feel if you got those 3 and you need a receiver?
I would go Brown personally. Again, I think it's just the quarterback being the tiebreaker there for me.
Absolutely.
The best passer of the 3 and not being very close. But I get what you're saying about Moore. He's a great player. Talent's there. I think this is a guy that, like you said before, if he comes out and has a good 4 or 5 weeks, it would be tough to do, but I'd go ahead and move him. It's a really similar situation to what happened essentially last year. I mean, Moore looked amazing and Darnold was good. They came out, they were 3-0, and Moore was getting 30% of the targets, and Darnold was actually throwing the ball decently. So, and I think you could have gotten wide receiver 1 value for Moore if you traded him at that point. So I think at the end of the year, Moore's going to have his big weeks, but he's going to have some down weeks too, and he's going to end up as kind of a lower tier wide receiver 2 with some boom or bust in him. And basically his whole career, that's just kind of how the guys with the bad quarterbacks end up going. I mean, they're really just at the mercy of how their quarterback is playing that week, and when they're inconsistent, there's not much you can do as a wide receiver. You're going to have to rely on the ball being thrown to you in the right spot. So
I agree with that. So I want to pivot for just a second here because, well, with the whole Marquis Brown situation, and we did an NFC West pod, but I can't remember your take completely on this. How do you think there's a chance that after 6 games that him and Kyler kind of get that Oklahoma rapport going again, and he just becomes the wide receiver 1 on that team, even when D-Hop returns?
I think so. I just think there's room for both of them to operate kind of separate of each other. I mean, I think Hopkins coming back is going to hurt Ertz more than it hurts Marquise Brown, if that makes sense. I feel like they kind of operate in different ends of the field. I think Hopkins can complement Brown more than steal. Obviously, his target share is going to come down, but I think the defensive attention that Hopkins will command is going to help Marquise in the long run. So I think and it just gives Marquise Brown a chance to come out and show something to the Cardinals. So if he comes out and looks great for 6 games, they're not going to turn away from him, even if Hopkins comes back. So I think that's a good situation for him. And again, it's a young quarterback and a talented wide receiver. If they show out together, that you could be looking at a top 10 wide receiver with a chance. I mean, this is a guy that can win you weeks as well. Marquise Brown can hit the home run ball for sure.
I will agree with that. As I've kind of digested it a little bit more, I could see where you would take Marquise Brown in that situation. I like how neither of us said Metcalf. That situation, I just feel bad for that guy if he even plays this year. So yeah, I mean, I still like the upside of Moore. I'm just kind of a fan, and I don't know. Like I said, I feel like that team has to win games. They're going to have to get the ball moving, and if McCaffrey's healthy, he may have a year that he hasn't had yet. So you could say the same about Brown. It's just kind of those two. I feel like have a potential to go up in trajectory. Where Metcalf, if he has the same season that he had last year, you'd be happy. So I don't think you go wrong in Moore or Brown. I think you go wrong where you start thinking Metcalf's better than those two guys.
I think, where you're hoping with Metcalf, you're just hoping for a quarterback change at some point.
Right.
Maybe you got to hope the guy that's starting week 1 isn't on the roster right now, because Geno Smith or Drew Lock's just not going to get there.
Baker?
We've seen that firsthand for all you that have followed Drew Lock since his Mizzou days. He's just never been a great consistent quarterback. So I think Moore and Brown I would take over Metcalf in that situation, but Brown would be the guy I would target.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Let's lean into the Falcons here for just a little bit. Yep. I think we both agree that this team is semi-tanking. I mean, I don't feel like Mariota is going to tank because he needs a good year to potentially resurrect his NFL career. But I think if he could just go out there and show that he would be a serviceable backup, then he can have a Chase Daniels type career where he makes $40-50 million and doesn't play football. So, which I think would be good for him because when he does play, he does seem to get injured pretty easily. So hopefully he just makes it through the season and he just kind of gets established as the backup. Potential for Desmond Ridder to come in and, take snaps from him at some point, which I could completely see on the table. I mean, this team's going to want to know if Desmond's a potential NFL quarterback in their transition year, and this is it. So, do you have any takes on the Falcons, any direction that they're going or anything?
No, not really. I mean, the roster is it's been stripped apart. Their wide receiver room is laughably bad as far as their depth goes. I mean, Drake London's the number 1 in there, and he's never taken an NFL snap. And beyond that, it's pretty tough looking at the names on the list. So the Falcons are clearly tanking in my mind. And yeah, you'll see Ridder at some point for sure. I mean, it just makes no sense. Even if Mariota's playing well and they're 2-5, why would you keep him in there? I mean, you might as well just see what Ridder has. If he can be a starter for a couple of years, that's great. Or if he's your long-term backup, that's great too. But it just makes a lot of sense to see what he has. So I think you'll see Ridder at some point. And I don't really have too much on them as a team. Beyond that, we can just kind of move into the fantasy unless you have something else you want to say.
No, I mean, I think that we can, let's just jump right in. We can start with probably their highest rated fantasy player, but I think he's off both of our boards as of right now, and that's Kyle Pitts. I mean, he's going as the tight end 3 overall, getting drafted 34th overall, which if you're in a 12-teamer, that's right at the end of the 3rd round, which is unbelievable. I mean, you're barely missing out on, Kelsey, and where you would be drafting at in that position would be the end. So if you're drafting Kyle Pitts in the 3rd, then you missed out on Kelsey and Andrews on that 1-2 turn, and you're just trying to make a quick pivot, and that's just a terrible decision. I mean, if he has a great year, for his standards, I don't think it's going to be a fantasy relevant year, to be taking him this early. I mean, that's right. You have Mike Evans going a few picks before him right now. Like, that's unbelievable that he's even close to that. So, and in the way that I rationalize this, if Kyle Pitts was drafted as a wide receiver in fantasy, him and Drake London would be pretty damn close to each other. And Drake London's getting drafted 92 overall as the 40th wide receiver. So you're just hoping that Kyle Pitts is a wide receiver 1 in the tight end role, similar to Jimmy Graham, but I don't think his value there is going to come until next year, potentially 2 years down the road.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you on most of what you said about Pitts. I mean, the offense is just going to limit them a ton, and they don't have a lot to contain other than Pitts and London on the outside, who's unproven at this point. So Pitts is going to see a lot of tough coverage, and he's going to have Marcus Mariota throwing him the ball when he does. So I just don't really love that combination. I think you're just going to get some games where he gets 8-9 targets, catches 2 or 3 balls, and doesn't do much for you. And he's got the big play potential. He'll have some weeks. He'll have some 100-yard games with a touchdown. But I don't know. I just don't
agree that he had a downgrade we both agree he downgraded from Matt Ryan, right?
Oh, 100%. As a passer, no question.
Right. So it's such a dependent position. I think that's just where I would draw the line with them also. I mean, you're giving up so much draft value for a player that could be, I mean, if he has to finish tight end 3, and when you're taking him there, you're thinking he's competing with Kelsey and
exactly.
Andrews for 1 or 2. So
100%.
Very risky. If it pays off, you'll look like you know what you're doing, but I feel like good fantasy drafters aren't going to be taking Kyle Pitts this year.
Like you said, I just don't really see any way he gets into the top 2 unless Andrews or Kelsey gets hurt. There's just, I don't see the touchdown potential or even half of the touchdown potential either one of the other guys have.
Yeah, and I mean, he doesn't even if one of them gets hurt and he finishes number 2, how far behind is he from the number 1 spot? Exactly. I mean, you're drafting him as if he's going to be right there behind him when he could potentially fall behind guys like Gronk or my guy Robert Tonyan, who's a great fantasy value. So
to put it behind Tonyan, but yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, the offense is tough, and I don't really see how Pitts moves too much beyond his numbers from last year. I mean, obviously the touchdowns are going to come back a little bit. He only had 1 all of last year and over 1,000 yards, which is pretty incredible. So he's probably going to get to 5 or 6 this year, but I think his yardage total is going to come down a little bit, and his catch rate's definitely going to go down. So I don't know. Yeah, we're both kind of out on Pitts this year at his current ADP. Love the player, but the draft capital and the situation sort of scare us off. We can kind of transition that into London here. He is a little bit more of a target for us, not necessarily in the way that he's going to end up on a lot of our teams, but in that we like his value a little more than Pitts, at least. He's at 92 overall, wide receiver 40. That's not a bad place to take your shot. If London comes out and he is all he's cracked out to be as the number 1 wide receiver off the board at 8th overall, then he's probably going to beat wide receiver 40. I mean, he's going to get a lot of targets theoretically, and they don't really have anybody else in the offense that is proven. So, I mean, he's going to get his opportunity, and he's got the pedigree. So, I mean, he's got a chance. He's just got Marcus Mariota throwing him the ball and not a lot of other options to take away defensive attention. So it's going to be tough.
I completely agree. I mean, when we're kind of looking at where he's getting taken, I'm probably taking my shot on Olave, who we talked about last episode, over Drake London. So, I mean, if he falls to me in I don't even know who he would have to be next to for me to take him over them. In this situation would be a lot easier to tell, but he's kind of one of those, like I said, like if him and Kyle Pitts were both receivers, then they'd probably both be around the same ADP because let's say Drake London gets 30% of the targets. I mean, how many targets is that? What's the quality coming from Mariota? I mean, there's also a chance Mariota gets hurt and then it's Desmond Ridder. And then what if Desmond Ridder is just a complete bust? And then, which is fine because, and this is why I don't care, because not that I don't care, but when you're drafting Drake London, I mean, you're kind of just drafting him with the knowledge of he could easily be dropped from a week to week basis, but I'm going to bet on his upside. And that's why you're going to take him in fantasy. It's just, it's hard for me to see a realm where he just has a breakout year. Like Chris Olave, I could see him being a deep threat for Jameis, and Jameis just taking shots to him maybe too often, and he breaks a couple for long touchdowns and he's fantasy relevant, a couple weeks. I think there's plenty of chances where Drake London's just completely irrelevant for the majority of the season.
Yeah, Drake London's really just going to have to rely. I mean, his talent is going to have to take him over the top here. He is going to face tough situations with the defensive coverage, and he doesn't have the most talented passer throwing the ball either. So it's a really tough situation. But if you're taking London, you're kind of just betting on the talent there. And with an 8th or 9th round pick, I don't mind it. But like you said, I think there's just other guys in that area that we'd rather take our shots on. So at least London's value isn't crazy. I mean, like if you're burning an 8th or 9th round pick, that's not going to kill you. So if you really like London,
Drake London, Yeah, if you love Drake London and you think he has the highest ceiling, then take him. Like that's a personal pick when you're at that point in the draft.
Exactly.
So he probably won't be on my team, but that's just because I like the other rookies more and potentially a player that's there more. But when you're getting that late, it's nothing to, you're not really looking at value as much. Whereas his counterpart Kyle Pitts, you're throwing away your third round pick. So
Right.
big
Exactly. That's the
difference
big
there.
thing.
But
100%. I think we're both kind of out on Pitts as far as his ADP goes. But if you want to take London in the 8th or ninth round, that's your preference. But you just
for
kind of got to
sure.
call your shot with the guys in that area.
Yep. Now we have a really heated backfield here. So
We kind of disagree.
obviously the RB1 in this offense, Cordarrelle Patterson, who had the insane breakout. I think why was he running back 6 last year overall at the end of the season?
I don't
So
have the numbers in front of me, but I know he was top. I know he finished top 10 in points per game, at least in PBR leagues for sure.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, definitely in PPR, that's where all his value was. So I mean, where he's getting drafted at now, I mean, you're kind of getting him, I believe, at the you RB25. So low tier RB2. You're not really going to be drafting him for his upside. You're kind of just drafting him for that week to week, catches a couple passes out of the backfield, is going to get you that RB2 kind of consistent performance. And then he has the potential to have those breakout weeks. So I don't mind where he's getting drafted at now. If you don't go RB heavy early in the draft, I think he's a fine running back to take. So I know you like another running back in that backfield a little bit more. So why don't you tell the world about Tyler Algiere?
Sure thing, Kody. Yeah, I'm going to touch on Patterson real quick. He is a tough one for me for sure. I mean, like you said, top 10 in points per game last year, and this offense needs him. I mean, they don't really have a ton of playmakers, and they're going to kind of have to lean on the run game, I think, to shorten these games and have a chance to win a few. But I like this other guy a little bit more. This call is a little bit more about the organizational philosophy here for the Falcons. I think it just makes a lot more sense for me intuitively to see in their eyes if they're like you said 1-6, 1-7. I think you just got to throw Algier out there and see what you have in him because Patterson is not isn't there's no chance Patterson is a part of the next really good Atlanta Falcons team because that's 2 or 3 years down the road. We're talking about a 31-year-old hybrid wide receiver running back, good story, but not a guy that's going to be a difference maker in 3 years. So I think Algier could be. Obviously, I mean, it's a long shot with a 5th-round running back. The hit rate isn't great there, but I really liked his film, and he's got all the opportunity in the world here. And he's a little bit more of a traditional rusher, which I feel like blanking on Arthur Blank is not Arthur Blank. Arthur Smith is the coach of the Falcons. He
Yep.
came from Tennessee. Operates a little bit more of a traditional stretch zone running game, and I think Algier fits that a little better than Patterson does. So I just think it makes a lot of sense for the Falcons to see what they have in Algier, and if he gets the opportunity and he ends up being a decent player, he's going to get a lot of looks, and you can get him for almost free in drafts right now. He's going 140th overall, RB50. I'm taking my shot on him in most of my leagues, I think.
That's completely fair. I would say the Falcons maybe best case scenario for their team is they're 1-6 and Cordero looks like a great player. Not a great player overall, but just he's having another great season and he gets traded to
Exactly.
a team that had a running back injury or someone like that. So,
Makes a lot of
I
sense.
and then Tyler Algier can move in there and be fantasy relevant. But I think you're kind of there could be a potential where maybe we get to like a 50-50 split, but you have to hope Patterson either goes down with an injury or gets traded, which is could be very likely depending on how their season goes. So when with Tyler Algier, if you pick him up at the end of your draft, I mean, you're probably going to get some, people who don't know what they're talking about looking at you sideways, and he could be fantasy relevant by the end of the year.
Yeah.
So just depends on how long you can kind of hold that roster spot, how the season's
Right.
going and stuff like that. But definitely someone to keep a lookout for. I don't see him moving up in drafts by any means. So I think he's going to be that last kind of pick guy for a lot of people. So yeah, I can't argue with you there. I would just take the safer pick in Patterson and not bet on an injury or a trade to happen.
Right. Yeah, of course. I mean, I get that. I mean, I think it's just all
Yeah,
about the ADP here with Algier being almost free and Patterson being an
right.
RB25. You got to take him and let me see if I have his ADP on here. I don't have Patterson's ADP. I know he's RB25 though, so that probably puts him in the seventh, maybe even sixth round. That's some decent capital. Got some other good players going around there, so I don't mind taking a shot on Patterson. Like you said, he's really necessary to this offense. But if they hand the reins to Algiere, he'll be a steal at 140th overall. Do you have anything else you want to touch on with the Falcons, or can we get into these best bets?
No, let's move right into the best bets. You can kind of go. You lead off with one of yours, and then I'll take one.
Natural transition point here. Algiere at Rookie of the Year for plus 5,000. I kind of want to get into a little bit of the lines here. I just want to make this for other people that aren't necessarily trained bettors or people that are really experienced with looking at lines. I just want everybody to know what this means when we say plus 5,000, plus 115, minus 120. What does that mean? So it's all 100 base, and you're looking at plus 5,000 means that is how much money you would win if you put down $100 bet. So everything is based off that 100. So a plus 5,000 is a fancy way of saying 50 to 1. And exactly. That's just kind of how we're going to think about it there. So with that in mind, at 50 to 1, really long shot odds. And like we've said, this is kind of a year that I think with the Rookie of the Year betting, you can attack the other positions, running back, wide receiver, more so than other years because you don't have a ton of rookie quarterbacks that are going to be playing a ton of games. I mean, Kenny Pickett is the only one that's sort of in line to potentially be the starter. But if Trubisky wins that job outright, or maybe he plays 5 or 6 games and Pickett just can't rack up the stats to end up being in the Rookie of the Year conversation, I think a running back or wide receiver can come out and have a decent year and win it as long as they have the opportunity. And if Algiere ends up being the guy and he gets 300 touches, I mean, he's going to accumulate yards and touchdowns and all that. So he could end up just kind of winning it by a lack of a ton of other good options.
Yeah, absolutely. And to even kind of, let's bring it down from 100 a little bit, because like if you talk about betting $100 on anything, that could turn away like a bunch of people because they think that's outrageous.
It doesn't have to be $100 bet,
right? So let's say if you put a $10 bet on this, your $10 bet could turn into $500 if Tyler Algiere was to win. So that's where, with that bet, it's a very, very big long shot. That's why you get those odds, but there is a chance where that bet could cash. That's where I think when you kind of look at those, kind of when you get to that plus 5,000 and higher in most situations, like you're kind of just hoping for random luck at that point. But Algiere does have an opportunity to impress a whole organization that's really just kind of in a weird turning point. So he could easily get on the field early. And if it comes out in training camp that he is running back 1 and like they're looking to move Cordarrelle Patterson, I mean, these odds become plus 2,500 immediately. Right. I mean, if not even tighter than that. So I think it's a good bet. I didn't think so much the first time that we kind of discussed this, but I can't hate on it anymore.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing here is the odds that were like a 50 to 1 is a pretty long stretch. I mean, I think that's the other thing here that I kind of wanted to get into is that when we're looking this far in advance for bets that aren't going to cash for 6 to 7 months at a time, you want longer shots because you don't have to hold up capital on bets that are going to pay out evenly. You don't want to have $100 bet sitting there that's going to win you $100 for 7 months, and you just don't know how long that's going to take to cash out. So in this case, I think this is something that you can attack some value here. And like you said, if Patterson goes down with an injury in training camp, these odds are going to have, or even more than that, go down to maybe even like 20 to 1. So these are odd. You're betting on the lack of information here, essentially. And once that becomes clear, the odds are going to shrink if it's in his favor. And I don't really think they're going to get bigger. I think 50 to 1 is probably the longest odd that you'll see, even if Algiere goes into the season as the clear number 2 and they're saying Patterson's going to be the guy with full workload. It's probably still going to be around 50 to 1. So I think you want to take it now while you can. And then, if you get some good information in training camp, you've already got the value on the 50 to 1. So that's kind of
who won Offensive Rookie of the Year last year.
Oh, that's a good question. Had to be Jamar Chase, right? I mean, I don't know for sure, but
he was a rookie. Obviously, it had to be Jamar Chase.
Okay. I don't know for sure, but I can't imagine it was anybody other than Jamar Chase. I mean, you had a lot of competition with quarterbacks last year, but man, I mean, he probably had the best rookie season of all time.
Yeah,
right after the second best rookie season of all time in Jefferson. So I think it had to have been Chase.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. So,
A lot of
okay,
these like
so
top wide receiver guys we've been talking about are just on some bad teams. So I just think you could see a kind of a lower tier pick rise through the ranks here a little easier than most years.
yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So, you have this one listed here. I'm gonna take this one over because I think this is gonna be my favorite bet of the day.
All
So,
right.
Carolina to make the playoffs at plus 500. So
Mhm.
bet 100, win $500. Bet 10, 150, win 50.
Yeah.
Not huge odds here, but when we're kind of looking at season long, you know, bets, I would rather take that bet at plus 500 than their over 6 wins at plus 105. Because if I bet that same $100 and they end up with 9 wins, I win $105. If I put $100, they win 9 games and they're in the playoffs, I win 500. So,
Right.
um, I again with this team, it really just depends on Christian McCaffrey being on the field, and I think if he's healthy, I mean, he is good enough on his own to win a football game or two. I mean, he's just flat out unbelievable. So if you put him in that offense, even with a struggling Darnold, and last year looked pretty bad, I think that they could have a chance. Also, one thing with the Panthers, and I think this is an owner situation because I don't think any smart coach would do this. Quit bringing in other freaking quarterbacks. Just play out your year. You don't need Cam Newton reunion. Like that was such a disaster last year, and it got celebrated when he got signed. They just made their chance at the Super Bowl go up.
They were desperate for sure.
Right. But at that point, just write it out with who you got. Like, don't make any dumb big signing. Like, don't bring Cam Newton back again. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. Just let Sam Darnold be the guy. If he gets hurt, put in PJ Walker and then reset next year. If you guys suck, you suck. Go get a quarterback. Don't do anything stupid. But if McCaffrey's healthy and Darnold's a quarterback all year, I could see them winning out 9 games, sneaking into the playoffs, especially in a weak division.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, NFC being weak helps out here. Not nearly as hard to get into the NFL playoffs as it used to be with the seventh team. I mean, you're looking at they just got to be seventh out of 15 teams here. So a lot of you got the Falcons, you got the Jets and or sorry, not the Jets, the trying to think of the other
Saints.
teams that are kind of tanking in the NFC, like the Lions. You've got the
Oh, yes.
Bears.
Sorry.
You've got a few other teams below them that are probably not
Seahawks.
going to be in contention at all. So the Panthers don't have a ton in the way of wild card competition. They're on the lower end, but 5-1 odds is pretty good shot at them being. If they get to 9 wins, I think they could sneak into the playoffs.
Yeah, they have to be easily the second best team in this division. Because I would imagine, I mean, I don't have it broken out, but I would imagine you're going to have most likely 3 teams out of the NFC West, depending on how the Cardinals finish.
Right.
And then you're either going to get a team out of the North or a team out of the South, which, again, the Panthers are going to have to be better than the Cardinals or the Vikings, I would say, to get into the playoffs next year. So it's going to be an uphill battle, but that's why it's plus 500 odds.
Right.
And you don't. And again, if they win 7 and they miss the playoffs, but they hit their over, then oh well, you won yourself $5 on a full season long bet. Like,
right.
Why would you watch 17 football games for $5? I mean, that's
yeah, I'm taking the value here on the plus 500. I mean, that like you said, the competition's weak, and they could sneak into a weaker field here in the NFC with the extra playoff spot now. So.
For sure. Well, I don't think our 20-minute videos worked out too well. I think we still talked a while, but that's all right. We're still shorter than where we normally are.
We're working on it.
Rush through anything. So, but this one, like I said, this will be up on Wednesday, which will be the 15th. So this will be up Wednesday. I think we're gonna probably reshoot the AFC South. We'll break that one up into 2 separate ones. Also, get that posted over next weekend. And yeah, I think. Pretty solid pod. Do you have any last final comments? Anything you want to throw out there?
I don't think so, guys. Yeah, be on the lookout. We'll give you updates on the pods coming in the future, but Monday and Wednesday for the NFC South pods. And let us know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. Please help us out. We appreciate you, and we'll try to keep coming with some good content as the summer rolls on here.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Peace out, everyone.